recorded, and that recording will be shared with you attendees and the other people that booked onto the session as well. So before I hand over to Lance, who's going to chair for us today, I've got a question to ask you all. So I'm just going to launch a single polling question, and if you wouldn't mind filling it in, that would be greatly appreciated. So that should be on your screen now. Okay, so most people filled that in now, so I'll end the polling and share the results. So, Lance, almost half of people have previously considered hiring ex-offender, 35% haven't, and they're the ones that you're going to have to convince today. Yes. 16% sure. So that's some interesting results, and we'll be asking that question again at the end of the session to see if we've managed to change your minds. But what I'll do now is hand over to you, Lance.
Thank you, Stephen, and good morning, everybody. My name's Lance Harris. I work for the Ministry of Justice in a small department called New Futures Network, and we're members of Make UK, so that's why we're here. And when we joined, interestingly, we paid all our money for membership a week before lockdown. So it was kind of mid-March last year, and we had these great plans that I would be out meeting you and representing the MOJ and prison industries to try and develop our partnership working. But sadly, as we all know, coronavirus hit us. And so we've been working with Make UK, and my colleague Jazz, who's on the call as well, she's in our MOJ communications team. So we've been thinking, how can we get our message out to the manufacturing sector and perhaps see some benefits? So we're here this morning to do a couple of things, really. We've got Ross and Henry, who work with us already, and we'll ask them to introduce themselves in a moment. And we've got Bhavina, who's going to give us some real good advice and guidance on skills and qualification delivery in the sector. I'll do a little brief overview of prisons and what goes on in prisons, because I think there's intrinsically some interest that you might have, or you might not even know what goes on in prisons. So it could be of interest, and we might promote, hopefully, some of those 35% who said no in the poll a little higher. And that's in our planning, that was our measure, that we want to get that measure up and spark a bit of interest and consider perhaps employment of offenders that you might not have thought about before as a real beneficial option for your organisation. Stephen, could we go to slide 1, please? And I'll ask Henry, Ross and Bhavina, could we just 1 minute each at this stage? Ross, sorry, Henry, please, 1 minute, introduction, who you are, what you do.
Sure. So good morning, everybody. I'm Henry Powell. I'm the commercial director in Press Plastics in Littlehampton. We make predominantly medical and some industrial products down in Littlehampton. We're a plastics manufacturer, and we combine with our plastics manufacturing skills, clean room assembly, a lot of robotic assembly, and a variety of laser etching, printing, assembly, gluing processes as well. So we make sharp spins for the Irish HSE, their health service, the English NHS, 9 other health services across Europe, some in the Far East and the Middle East as well. We're very busy with that at the moment on the vaccine rollout, and we make quite a wide range of other products, predominantly our own product ranges. We I suppose are here today because we've had a relationship with the prison service going back 7 or 8 years now, and we have a facility at Ford Prison on the prison grounds, our own building, where we do assembly, packing and quality testing for some of our products. And we use that as a feeder for staff progressing through there, learning good general manufacturing practices and getting back into the world of work. And then we feed staff from there to work with us under Rottle at Littlehampton while they're still in the jail, living in the jail, but working for us in the days, and then we employ staff as they come out. We have found this is an excellent addition to our sort of our quality feed for good staff coming through from operators all the way through the business. That is us in a nutshell.
Thank you, Henry. Ross, could you give us a quick overview of LMB as well?
Yeah, so LMB is a company that collects textiles. So if you, in and around London, we've got about 500 textile banks. So the metal bins that you see on council car parks and on the street corners, we operate them in partnership with local authorities and charities. What's collected from there, about 50% suitable to be reworn as clothing. Most of that gets exported abroad. And about 50% is actually recycling. So 15 years ago or so, maybe a little bit longer, we started partnering with the Ministry of Justice. We now have 10 workshops in 10 different establishments across the country. I think we, in normal circumstances, have a roll of 600 residents that work in those workshops, and we cut up about 150 tons of clothing per week through that. So it's quite a large operation. Obviously, from working with offenders whilst they're actually in the prisons, we get to know them, we get to train them, we provide forklift training and various other skills. So when it's time to leave, we either employ them on Rottle, which I don't know if any of you know what that means. It's basically on day release. So they come out and work for us, and then overnight they go back. And then after that, a lot of the guys, hopefully, or ladies as well, will stay on and get a full-time job with us. Or quite often, they come to us for a couple of weeks and use it as a springboard into another job. So it's been very successful. And yeah, as I said, 15 years.
Thank you, Ross. Brilliant. Thank you. Bhavina, please.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Bhavina. I'm the Senior Campaigns and Skills Policy Manager at Make UK. So for those of you who don't know, Make UK is the voice of UK manufacturing. So we represent about 20,000 manufacturers, some of your biggest and most well-known manufacturers like Jaguar Land Rover, Liberty Steel, but also some of your more smaller businesses, more family-run businesses like JJ Churchill and Warren Services. So our job is to really lobby government to make sure that we've got the conditions that manufacturers can thrive in. But for one of the key priorities for manufacturers is actually access to skills. So if you ask them what is their top 3 priorities, and our CEO, Stephen Phipson, said this at our conference last year, it's skills, skills, skills. So it's access to the right people in the right places. So for manufacturers, it's understanding where can they get those skills, who are the right people to fill those skills gaps, and how can we make sure that we're widening the talent pool through which we can recruit. It's worth pointing out that Make UK is actually also a training provider, so we're quite unique to other business groups. We have a technology training centre that runs over about 50 technical training courses in Aston, Birmingham. We also train about 400 apprentices each year, so we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. And we work in partnership with about 70 employers in the local area as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Bhavina. Thank you to the panel as well. I've known Henry and Ross for many years and met Bhavina just recently, and they're all integral to the 2 real drives that we have in New Futures Network, which is providing work for offenders while they're in our care, in custody, in our workshops, and then through the series of programs we have about delivering skills and qualifications, is to enhance offenders' employment prospects on release. Stephen, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Ooh, so see what's on the inside. So there's 3 ways really that we'd like to engage with you. The first one is through our prison industries, and as Stephen, as Ross and Henry pointed out, they already outsource work into our prison workshops. We have about 305 workshops in prisons across England and Wales. And we manufacture a huge range of products for our own internal needs. So stuff that we produce that's used in prisons, But we also, with our spare capacity and dedicated capacity, we offer that service to external manufacturers, people like yourselves. And like I said, when we joined Make UK last year, my vision was that I would be connecting with a number of you, hopefully. We'd even go into prisons and you'd see our facilities, and then consider outsourcing work to us. That's certainly one way that we can do that. And our facilities are pretty impressive, actually. I'll show you a slide in a moment about the industries that we have. They're the main manufacturing sectors and trades in this country. So there'll be no surprises, but I'll talk around them when we come to that slide. But, you know, we're pretty impressive, and we have staff that are trade qualified, supervising offenders that are sent into workshops where they undertake production to your specification or our own specification. And we realize that if we don't meet spec, pricing, quality, delivery, that our relationships with our commercial partners isn't sustainable. So we realize what's important to you, and the same things are important to us. So that's one way you can engage with us, by outsourcing work. The second way, Stephen, is something that I think it was Ross mentioned. We call it ROTL, and it's released on temporary license. And it's when an offender is coming to the end of his or her sentence, and they're deemed as being trustworthy enough that they're in more, I'll say, relaxed conditions in terms of security. And we start working with them and organizations to get them on day release. And both Henry and Ross and a huge amount of organizations engage with us in this way. And it's a great way for an offender to see that, or to reintegrate back into our communities and back into society and back into the work ethic. But also, if there's a potential for recruitment for both organizations, so you as the employer and the offender to kind of come together and under this day release scheme, is to work together with a view that as the offender is released, you might even be able to offer them employment. And of course, there's other benefits here. One is that if we're already working for you in one of our workshops, those offenders are product ready. They're trained. You might have been delivering a qualification specific to your organization. Well, we could deliver that in our workshop on your behalf. So you're then recruiting people that are a bit further down the pitch than perhaps going via more traditional methods of recruitment, like a job centre. So ROTL is a really good thing for us. And before COVID hit, and the restrictions that are in prisons at the moment, we had about 2,200 prisoners every day going out into ROTL locations, which were in retail, construction, manufacturing, high street stores that you'll know of, doing really great work and being really valued members of the workforce. So it's a great scheme. Sadly, COVID has just for the moment suspended that, but we'll return to that, I imagine, during the summer. And the other way that you can engage with us is employment on release. So what we generally do is link you with the most appropriate prison, and that might be driven by geography. So if you're a company in Bristol, for example, there's 3 or 4 establishments around there that will be releasing prisoners back into your area, or indeed prisons from further afield that could be releasing offenders back into the Bristol area. And we would work to identify what your criteria is, work with you, and then identify offenders with those appropriate skills, qualifications, and aptitudes, and motivation to leave prison and then come and work in your organization. And we've got companies that do all 3 of those. Henry and Ross over the years have done all 3 of those at the same time. We got organizations that just outsource work to us, and that's fine. And others that might just do ROTL or just employ prisoners on release. but it's a really fantastic way and many benefits, which I'll come to in a moment. So those are the three ways we'd like to engage with you. Stephen, if we could just have the slide that has all of our industries. So those are our main, or in fact, there are all of our prison industries. We employ about 11,000 prisoners a day into those workshops. And like I said, across the prison estate, which is England and Wales, we have about 300 workshops manufacturing goods for our internal needs. And I'll give you some examples. For example, in our engineering workshops, such as the high level of skills, that prisoners manufacture cell doors and grills and bars that keep them locked up. In woodwork, we manufacture cell furniture, so fire retardant materials to a very high specification, through to garden furniture made from hardwood materials. Clothing and textiles, 80,000 boxer shorts a year, 60,000 towels. We print, you know, we're a government department, so we do a huge amount of printing, from 4-color work down to single color business cards. So from booklets and pamphlets right through to business cards. 42 laundries, big industrial laundries. The prison population is nearing 85,000, and we launder every week for that population. And it's a big logistics exercise, but do you know what? If we didn't get it right, we'd soon know about it. And thankfully, it's a successful operation because, you know, prisoners want their clean laundry, and the decency agenda to us is extremely important. So, and there's one for Henry and Ross. Our plastic injection molding workshops are dotted around the country. There's about 8 injection molding shops. Henry outsources some molding into HM Prison Ford on the South Coast. And we have molding machines from, I think, 85 ton to 900 ton. Henry will know what that means. I'm not too sure, but it means we can mold a huge range of products, both for our internal needs, which includes knives, forks, spoons, plastic, of course, mugs, jugs, plates, and the like, and a number of specialist products for people like Henry. And then within recycling, there's a huge sector for us because recycling is all over the world, of course, but what recycling companies need, like Ross, who employs almost 600 people, 600 offenders every day in our workshops, is labour. And we've got an abundance of labour. So we're very beneficial to an organisation that's looking to process waste streams and recycle and upcycle. So the services we provide in prison are really valuable because we call them green collar workers. A lot of prisons have recycling operations and waste management. And you know what? When prisoners are released, prison leavers can get work in this sector because they've done some work inside with us. And wherever you're being released to, there's always a recycling or waste management company in the town, village, or city. So it's a good sector for us. And then we'll go on to the, thank you, Stephen. We'll go on to the benefits of working with us. So the broader picture, everybody, is this. If you engage with us and employ prison leavers or offenders on Rottle, you're engaging into, you know, the corporate social responsibility. And we know that organizations that work with us, 2/3 of them say that it increases their diversity and inclusion numbers greatly. And there's a real benefit to organizations that they're reaching out and working with a group of people, ex-offenders, that if they're given employment on release, the crime rate reduces, the reoffending rate reduces, there's less victims of crime, and we're making our communities safer. So there's not just the point of having semi-skilled, semi-trained, product-ready offenders coming into work in your organisation, you're really doing something morally good for your community and for the greater good. Like I say, we're in about 115 prisons, so there's always a prison near you. So if you're outsourcing abroad, there's maybe an opportunity to look at reshoring with us and have us manufacture to your specification. A recruitment pool, Henry and Ross use us, and we love it that they use us in this way, and so do many other organizations. Recruitment costs a lot of time and money, and linking with prisons and working with our resettlement teams inside each establishment to identify the type of person you want and to offer them employment is a great way of recruiting people. Stephen, some more on that slide, I think. Yes, we are competitively priced. Our pricing structure is quite complicated. We have direct costs and indirect costs, and we got some obligations there. But as manufacturers, and I'm from a manufacturing background, we've got certain obligations because we're funded by taxpayers. So we must recover our direct cost and make a contribution to our indirect cost. But we also have a code of practice, and that means that we won't take work away from an organisation that might make those staff redundant. That's not fair and right, morally right. So when we engage with you, if you outsource work to us, one of the things we say is, will this make anybody redundant? And if the answer is yes, then we won't continue with that opportunity. But if it allows you to outsource work to us and free up your perhaps more skilled staff to do more intricate or lucrative tasks and operations, then we see it as helping British business and British industry. So we see ourselves as partners in this, and it's quite an important opportunity for offenders to give something back while they're serving their time. Stephen, please. A couple more, everybody, and then we're through on the PowerPoint. So yes, we're nationwide, England and Wales, like I say, a couple of rural areas, kind of central Wales or down in Cornwall, where we're not got prisons, but generally there is a prison near you. If that prison's got all the capacity and capability, brilliant. It might be you need something specific, and we may outsource it to a particular prison, but we work together on that. And what fits you, we can marry that as well. And last thing is, it's your specification and our resources. We have workshops, forklift trucks, storage, plant and equipment. Imagine running all those industries I outlined a minute ago. We want to train prisoners and deliver qualifications that are relevant to what's going on in outside industry. So, we spend money on capital because A, it's efficient, B, it's the right thing to do, but C, it also gives prisoners the opportunity to work on, at times, up-to-date and modern machinery. It's not everywhere, but, we've got a lot of it. Stephen, that's the PowerPoint for the moment. Can we go back onto gallery, please? Good morning, everybody. So what we're going to do now, folks, is with our panel, we're just going to open up a little with Ross, Henry, and Bavina. We're just going to do a bit of a question and discussion period for a few minutes, and then we're going to open up to you all to ask your questions and involve in the discussions about how you're interested or might want to take this forward. So if I may, I'm going to start with Henry and Ross, who are both on mute. Gents, you need to come off mute.
Here I am.
Hello.
Excellent, loud and clear. Thank you, gents. We know each other for a few years, so this might be quite an informal way of interviewing you. Apologies if it comes that way. But gents, both of you, very briefly, how did you get involved with your local prisons all those years ago? Henry.
Okay, I'll go first. I was driving along, listening to the radio. Desert Island Discs came on, and James Timpson of Timpson's Shoes was on, and he was talking about the initiative he has. I think he's got a couple of thousand stores around the UK, and more than half of them are staffed by former offenders. He spoke about it with such passion and made clear that not only was it a socially cohesive thing he'd done for his organization, but he was also finding it a fantastic way to get talent and people who were reliable, hardworking, and had become the fabric of his business. So every morning I drive past, or in the old days before social distancing, on the way to work, I would drive past Ford Prison. So I phoned Ford Prison up, eventually got through to James Palmer, who's a very inspiring guy. And together we started on the journey of understanding how we could work with the prison service. And fundamentally for us, it's that exact same thing that I heard from James Timpson on the radio. It is an extraordinary pool of available talent. When you go and meet offenders who have been in prison for several years or more, who are looking for a new opportunity, but bring with them all of the skills in many cases that they developed before going to prison. And there are lots of people in prison who don't fit that criteria of sort of career criminal. There are lots of people in there, electricians, accountants, people who are used to running sophisticated equipment, people who are used to running teams, people who have run their own businesses, you name it, you'll find them in prison. So just an extraordinary talent pool that we now use to feed our business. And that's been the lesson for us. What James Timpson told us on the radio was true.
Brilliant. Thank you, Henry. Ross, anything to add further to that?
I think it might have been you that came knocking on our door all those years ago, but it was a case of, you know, we're prison industries, we're open for work. Have you got anything? And it coincided when most of our industry started offshoring. So the work that we first started doing with the prison was, you know, piece rate work that's very much labour intensive. And from a company's point of view, we believe in sort of UK manufacturing, and it seemed a lot more sensible to us to work with somebody who was half an hour down the road rather than out in Pakistan or sort of Poland or somewhere. So we just took that decision, and I think it's worked really well for us. And I think I'm very conscious of what you were saying earlier. You have got a lot of skills there, but you won't sort of take jobs away from people. So we wasn't employing anyone doing this work, and it just was a way for us to keep it onshore and, you know, not do lots of carbon miles to send something abroad and then bring it back, because all of our sales are within the UK. So it just made a lot of business and environmental sense.
Indeed. Thank you, gents. And I think one of the things that I heard James Timpson say, and I used to work with James when we set up some academies 10 years ago, was he said, I'm not just doing this to be nice to people. This is good for business. And recruiting prison leavers is what James started in a very quite high profile way, actually, and was a pioneer in starting this for us. And as Henry outlined, James, along with other blue chip companies that you know, like Waits, Halfords, DHL, Timpson's, we work with blue chip companies that are big organizations at one end, down to entrepreneurs, single owner manufacturers, and the core of our work, like most of us on this call, I imagine, are SMEs. So we can kind of bespoke our offer to you based on what you need. Ross and Henry would, I think, agree they're SMEs. And the work they do with us, outsourcing production, first off, is a really good way of starting this journey. And then from that, it develops that we can look at employment, both on Rottle and on release. Can I ask you both again then? Henry, I'll come to you first. You started employing offenders from Ford a few miles away into your company down at Bognor on Rottle. How did that come about, the Rottle, the release on temporary license? What happened? What was the process, Henry? So
much like any business, we will have a job description for a particular role that we're looking to fill. We find as we started, and this is a consistent process now, you give the prison the job description. There's a department there responsible for getting people out on Rottle. So it's set up a little bit like an employment agency. They will then advertise the role within the jail. and they'll get a variety of candidates to come through. And we can then go and interview the candidates, match them up against the job role, and employ them. The process involves also initial risk analysis from the staff at HMP Forward to come down, look at our working practices, check things like our insurance, our risk assessments, check that we're running as we should be. We then had an open consultation. The first move, of course, being the one that felt dramatic. We got all of our staff together and we explained what we wanted to do. And the other big benefit of this is it is very socially cohesive, and it binds our team together in a way that possibly wouldn't otherwise. We've got 4 facets to our corporate responsibility, and this is one of them. So we got all the staff together and we said, how do you feel about offenders coming to work alongside you? And there was a little bit of apprehension, but there were also a couple of very sweet older ladies who were doing some intricate assembly work with us, both of whom had a family member, in one case a nephew, in another case I think a son, who we didn't know but had been to prison, who were immediately, you'd look at I'm afraid the little old ladies, if you will, and you think they might be really nervous. They were really supportive. A couple of other members of staff, we've got 85 staff, a couple of them came to us and said that you didn't know, but I have been to prison myself. So we didn't have anybody who said, well, no, we don't want to do this. And we had lots of people who said, yeah, I think it's important that we help people get back into work. And we train them to be productive members of society. So great process at the prison, finding the right skills, checking all of the right things, insurance and health and safety at our place, and then just making sure our team were on board, which they have always been.
Brilliant. Thank you, Henry. Ross, that was the brothel side of it. You've employed offenders once they're out of prison as well. How has that benefited LMB?
I think sort of what you touched upon is you've already got a relationship with them. So in some cases, they will come out and do the same job or a similar job to what they was doing for us whilst they was actually serving. But a lot of the time it's not, because they will come out and take on a completely different job, but you've had that personal relationship with them. We run our workshops the same as we run our factories. So they know, what's expected of them. And just slightly from a personal point of view, you have had those years experience with them and it just sort of integrates quite easily. So yeah, as I was saying, some of the guys have come out and just come with us for a couple of months and then gone back to their old job, but because they've got a CV saying that they've worked, for us for this amount of time, it makes it easier for them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's significant points you both raised there. Bhavina, I've bought into this for the last 35 years since I've been in the prison service. Do you think, particularly manufacturing organisations, are looking to recruit more and more from diverse and more inclusive backgrounds within industry?
Yeah, I think diversity, inclusion and equality, the equality bit being the bit that we tend to forget about, is generally always focused firstly on gender and more recently around ethnicity, and rightly so. That's completely fine. I think if we look at manufacturing, it is, I think, the fourth worst in terms of diversity. So there's a lot of work for the sector to do to make sure that it is diverse, but that actually translates into genuine inclusion. But the bit we forget is the unprotected characteristics like class or just people from different backgrounds. So yes, gender is important. Yes, ethnicity, sexual orientation, all those things are important. But we do also need to just generally be thinking about the different people in our local communities. And I don't think we really talk about who we recruit in our business outside of just the normal talent pool that we fish in. I would argue that it is still a bit of a taboo subject. I mean, most businesses probably won't say we have 15 ex-offenders. Maybe we need to normalize that conversation. But I do think things are beginning to change where all that conversation around diversity isn't just about ethnicity and race or anything like that.
Okay.
It's about genuine inclusion and looking at my community saying, right, okay, who is on my doorstep? Who is within a 5-mile radius who can help fill my skills gaps? Because if ex-offenders are getting the training they need, then actually they can fill these skills gaps. There's no reason for them not to be able to. And we can provide that progression to those people and help them rehabilitate within the community where they don't have to then travel somewhere else or outside of where they've grown up.
Indeed. That's a really good point. Do you think that manufacturers particularly are becoming more and more challenged, though, to recruit people with the appropriate skills, trade skills?
Yeah, I think the skills gap, particularly in our sector, is quite big. I think it's only the construction industry that has a larger skills gap. So the Department for Education's Employer Skills Survey found that almost a third of vacancies in terms of the density of skills gap in our sector, which is really, really quite high. Part of that is driven by the fact that the sector is changing. So if we look at manufacturing today versus manufacturing 5 years ago, let alone 20 years ago, it's completely different. So we've seen more digitalization, we've seen this slow transition towards a green economy. It means that the roles are going to change and the levels at which those roles are will be different. So sometimes we hear the classic, oh, robots are going to take our jobs. Well, no, they're not. They're going to automate tasks. They're not going to replace jobs. So actually it means that who you recruit might be at a slightly different level. So actually manufacturers need to be looking at, right, I might still need people on my production line to pack things, to do those more manual tasks. But these people are also good enough to do some of those other jobs that might be in business admin, in coding, in computing. So if we look at not just those traditional skills that we've always recruited for, but those other wider skills, actually you've got a massive talent pool of people who can be your pipeline into filling those skills gaps. But it takes a brave company to do that, to be completely honest, because it's not a traditional route.
Indeed. I think you
Lance,
did a great...
can I just, sorry, Lance, can I just interject slightly? I think from our point of view as well, we're based in East London and found, skills gaps, just not skills as in, they've got the experience or training, just the habit of coming to work, that work ethic. We'd employ a lot of young guys, their mum and dad hadn't worked, and a lot of them did probably go the wrong route and end up in prison, but they've gone to prison, come out, learn the soft skills of working with other people during their time there within the workshop. So when they come out on release, it's not such a culture shock for them to actually be told what to do or work as part of a team or, just generally interact. And I think that's where we found it really helpful. Sometimes we just struggle to recruit people to do certain jobs.
I think one of the things that we overlook is those soft skills, Ross. And Bhavina and I were speaking last week. When you get offenders, and some of them, the first job they have is when they come to prison and they're sent to our workshops. So we give them the work ethic. It's about being punctual, taking instruction, being conscientious, working with others and behaving in a way that we all want as managers, and we recruit people. Yes, we deliver City and Guilds and MVQ level 1, 2s and 3s as trade-specific qualifications, but there's a lot of other things that people want that are outside of those kind of tangible certifications. By the way, folks, there's about 11 million people in Britain with a criminal record. So you can imagine, one of the things that I say when I meet organizations and I'm asking them to consider employment of offenders and prison leavers is, do you actively vet for criminal records and convictions? And they say no, or they say yes. But then I say, do you think there's anybody in your organization that could have had a criminal record? And the ones who don't vet for it, they'll scratch their chin a little and they say, oh, yeah, Billy down in the stores, or they'll name somebody that they think, has had some kind of criminal record. Our view is that an offender will become an extremely important member of your team, and often they're looking to get their life back on track, to glue their families back, to be given a second chance. And often they become extremely loyal members of your workforce. And they just want to be given a second chance and break the cycle of criminality that they were tied up in previously.
Can I just add a couple of things?
Henry, of course.
But Bavina said it takes a brave company. And I think, yeah, I mean, that first step does feel a little bit daunting. Once you take the first step, though, and you become, part of the process and you get familiar with it, it's incredibly easy. And it's not continually brave. It's just brave on the first step. And I think the other point I would make is that we talk about, feeding the talent pipeline and developing the skills. I've currently got a list of people out with Ford. I'm looking for an electrician. I'm looking for someone to network our factory for IT. I'm looking for a carpenter and a plumber. And experience tells me that I will fill all 4 of those roles in about the next 3 weeks. So you can be very specific about the skills you're looking for. You can write up a job description. You can put 5, 10, 15 years experience. They'll have the people. So I need those people for a particular job I'm doing this summer, where we're re-networking our factory and building a small new building. And those guys are going to do it for us. And likewise, if I was looking for somebody who was a mechanic and used to taking apart a couple of my big machines, I would be able to find somebody there. So it's not about all feeding the skills pipeline at that bottom level. And the people that you're going to meet are going to be very grateful that you're giving them the chance.
Yeah. And just to build on that point as well, I think it's Steve Morris who's put in the chat, the fact that we've got robotics and cobotics, and that's just normal now in manufacturing, that skill level has just suddenly moved up. So instead of that level 2, level 3, it's even possibly level 4 or 5. And actually, if we're going to support people to make that transition into those kind of job roles, it is the upskilling and retraining piece. And at Make UK, we've long argued that our education system just does not keep up with the pace of change. And then that's not kind of filtered out through the wider system. So if you've got businesses saying we need X, Y, and Z, which has changed from what it was 3 years ago, the education system and wider training system needs to keep up to date with that. But we know it moves so slowly, which is why you then can't access the people you need. But it's definitely a challenge.
That's a good point, Bavina, as well. So I will close this part of the session in a moment, but I think one of the biggest persuaders when I speak to organizations, if when I can say, or Henry or Ross or Bavina can say to organizations, do you know what? You're reducing the amount of victims. If you give prisoners employment on release and they've got accommodation and they're getting their families back together and their lives back on course, we're reducing reoffending, we're making our communities safer, and there's less victims. And that's such an important part of what we're trying to do. And do you know what? You're getting people that are trained, motivated. We've identified the good ones and the right ones for you. So it's a really good beneficial experience. If I could ask each of our members 1 minute each, and then we'll go and we'll open it up into the general forum. 1 minute each. Ross, the benefits that you've seen over the years of engaging with us.
I think it's, I think what you was just saying there is sometimes it does feel, it can be a little bit of a labour of love. You're a government department and work like one at times, but equally the benefits that you get are absolutely massive. Like you mentioned earlier, the equipment you've got. We've had the textile banks manufactured in prisons. I threw a project at your textiles team the other week and they came back with this amazing reusable courier bag made out of an old bag for life. So, and the skills you've got in there, there's the guy who does our forklift is a serving offender and he's taught himself it, and our forklift has never worked better. So there's all of these little things, and equally, I've got like one of the guys who worked for us on Rottle and then came to work for us. Every 6 months he comes past to check that I'm okay. And that's just like, you've made some friends out of it. And I think as a small business, sometimes it feels like you're up against it, but then when you do see that you've benefited someone, just for no other reason than, you know, that gives you a good feeling. And I think
Indeed.
I wouldn't be doing it if there wasn't lots of levels of sort of good, and it's not just financial. So that's my take.
Thank you, Rob. Henry.
I think, look, there is a lot of commercial real benefit here. You get people at that moment in their lives when they really want another chance, they're really motivated. They therefore then become, when you treat them properly, when you train them up, very loyal, very hardworking. This route for recruitment for us is much more efficient in terms of the eventual quality and the result than the standard commercial route of going out and using agencies. We get people just at that moment when it works that much better. So it's a much more efficient recruitment process. And picking up on this point about diversity, about grounding the business, about making it of the community, which we feel is really valuable for the cohesion across the company, it's an almost unique way of doing that. And finally, you are, you know, for the individual, you're changing their life, and there's a certain amount of satisfaction that everybody should feel from being part of that process.
Indeed. Thank you, Henry. Bhavina, on a kind of broader note then, offenders and skills and meeting the skills gap, or the upskill battle as we call it. Just some final words before we open up to the members.
Yeah, I think it's one of many routes that manufacturers can use to be able to fill that skills pipeline. And I think at a time when things are really challenging, we have to kind of broaden our minds to explore the different routes that can be helpful for our businesses. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the Kickstart scheme being announced, everyone was a bit like, is this a good idea? Is this not? But actually, that's a fantastic way to kind of help people on universal credit or the long-term unemployed. We've got 91 companies involved in that scheme because Make UK are a gateway, and that's offered 362 vacancies. That's 362 people whose lives would have been changed.
Indeed, yeah.
And I think that's the really important bit here. As much as it is about CSR, much as it is about doing our bit for the local communities, it also just makes business sense. So let's focus on trying to get different people from different backgrounds who can bring a diversity of thought to our businesses, because some of the challenges we face, whether it's like climate change or digitalization, you need people from different backgrounds. And actually, their attitude is going to be just as important as the skills that they can bring. So that hard work, that turning up on time. You have no idea how many manufacturers tell me, I hired a young person and they didn't turn up on time, or they want to be manager in a year. So actually, that can rub off on people, that hard work, that, you know, I've got to put my shift in, work hard, work my way up, and that progression piece. So there's lots for us to learn, but I would encourage businesses to start reaching out and have those conversations. Speak to a company who's done it so you understand how it works, so that taking that first step doesn't feel like a massive barrier. So I know you guys can help us. I know our tech center can also help us as well. So I just encourage manufacturers to do that.
Exactly. Thank you, Bhavina. Stephen, I'm just mindful that we've got a chat room, so you might have been monitoring some stuff there, or we can open it out to people generally for a few minutes.
Yeah, so we've had a few questions in the chat. I'd say the first one that came through was from Steve Morris, and he says, automation and robotics is increasing in manufacturing. This means retraining and upskilling people to use software tools rather than traditional manufacturing techniques. What steps are being taken to support offenders in this new era of automation, robotics and software? So that's directed at you, Lance, I suppose.
Oh, I hope Henry was going to take that one. A couple of things. One is that we recognise that STEM skills particularly are forever growing. It's odd, in prisons, one of the things we do, you want lean and mean, and perhaps in our environment, we often create jobs because we want more prisoners to have the opportunity of working in our workshops. So we'll build in more inspection and final inspection bays, and we'll break tasks down more into smaller segments. So automation for us is, yes, we've got huge ranges of plant and equipment, but if we had automation it would deny us employing offenders. But we recognise that in some instances, we do need to deliver that stuff. So we buy equipment that is more automated. I know that's not a great answer, but
I can add in.
Oh, please, Henry, and rescue me.
Adding to. So at Ford, there's a CNC course called CNC programming. It's a very short step there to robotic programming. And we've brought people through from that and then got them involved in programming robotics specifically.
Brilliant. Oh, that's really good. Good. Stephen, sorry, I can't see the chat, but happy to.
No, that's right. I'll go through. So let's have a little look. There's actually quite a few questions in there now. They're coming in thick and fast. So actually, Joe Clarkson, if you don't mind, I'm going to pick on you a little bit because you made some very kind words in the chat there. And it sounds like you've got some interesting experience yourself that is that's relevant. So would you mind just saying a few words about what you said in the chat?
Yeah, I guess firstly, I didn't really know 100% what I'd get out of joining this at first. But really, from a personal point of view, just to realise that conversations like this are happening in such a big industry, and the likes of Ross and Henry playing such a big role in it is fantastic to listen to. So fair play to everybody that's joined and doing it as well. I unfortunately ended up in one of Lance's establishments, let's say. I had a bad few years, gambling addiction, totally deserved it. I think prisons are essentially there for rehabilitation, in my opinion. They go a long way to provide that, I think. But I think them last 6 months of your sentence is vital to get them necessary training skills to lead them into welcome industries. And I think manufacturing is one of them. I think construction's another big one.
Indeed, yeah.
I think getting them training pathways in place, linking them directly where you would know there's going to be a job. There might not be a job with Ross or with Henry, but in the manufacturing industry is brilliant. Yeah. The bit that you hit on the head where you can offer as part of the workshops inside the establishments is brilliant because they can kind of pick up the bespoke part of that company, which if you do take on someone, it takes time, doesn't it, to learn your company ethos and your company methods as well. So,
Joe, you said something there that's quite significant. Whilst I'm the national sector lead for manufacturing, there's 4 of me, and we have construction, retail, catering and hospitality, and digital and IT. So we feel that those are the areas where we can channel offenders and prison leavers into those job markets. So I just happen to be the manufacturing lead because of my background and so on. But construction, I think, it's almost compulsory to have a criminal record to get on site and work in construction. But that's such a huge sector for us to put prisoners into employment, and we get a lot of success there, obviously.
Yeah. I think a key thing to learn from that, Lance, is give us 30 more seconds. I'm really involved in it all, like from employers training to the actual candidates themselves. And the one thing I will say about construction is it's maybe handed out too many training courses, and we might end up losing some really big and significant employers. So
indeed,
it's maybe stopping now, pausing, getting the training in place to make sure this works long-term and sustainable, as opposed to give anybody a willy-nilly kind of thing.
Yeah, good point.
All positive, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There was one, Stephen, if I can interject, what's our reopening schedule? Like the rest of the country, we've got a tier system. We're at tier 4 at the moment in prisons. And we have a central senior management team that are managing us through our restrictions. Currently, our workshops are closed, apart from a few critical workshops. But, like the rest of the country, we're hoping that we can start moving offenders into our workshops over the next few months and reopen as per normal. But I can't give you a date on a specific reopening. But it doesn't mean we're not operational. Of course we are. And we're open to discussions with you to perhaps look to tee something up soon so that when reopen happens, we can easily, start this process with you.
I
Stephen.
should just say, actually, that, I mean, our workshop that we run at Ford, which we put through all the social distancing procedures that we signed up for with health and safety, we kept it running through lockdown 3.
Indeed.
And we've now got first people coming back out on Rottle. I think prison service has been really interactive on this, and basically, in the instances I've been involved in, just employed the same standards as industry to make sure that we keep our people safe.
Indeed. Yeah, exactly.
There's a good question from Helen in the chat, and actually there's been a lot of what we've talked about today talks about the proximity to prisons, local community, and Helen asks, we are very rural but in need of manufacturing personnel and technical people to use increasing automation. Would people travel out to us as we're keen to get involved as they have exhausted the local supply?
Helen, is a really good question, because yes, we have rural prisons as well, but we know conurbations and built-up areas is probably where we get the highest or quickest wins. But prisoners on Rottle, for sure, can travel. They go out. Rottle is released on temporary license. So the license element of it is, if you're in a prison like Hollesley Bay, which is on the Suffolk coast, 20 miles from Ipswich, right out in the rural, coastal pathways of Sussex. But we have offenders who travel. They have their own transportation, or we have a prison bus, or they get on public transport. So we make this happen. And the one thing we do is the matching process is, where are you based? How do we get an offender on license that says you will leave the prison at 6 a.m., travel to that place of work and be there for 7:30, 8 o'clock. We go to about 2 hours, just like you and I commuting into the office or your premises. Prisoners have to do the same thing, and they've got to comply, and they've got to be punctual. And if they don't comply with their license, then that Rottle benefit that they get is denied and taken away from them. So they're extremely compliant offenders because they value and they've worked to get to Rottle. Davina.
I was just going to add a point here, just a wider skills point as well, because some of you would have seen that there was an FE white paper, which was the skills plan for jobs. But in that, they talked about local skills improvement plans. And this is about how can we tap into the local skills that we have in your local community or region, and how do you work with stakeholders to develop those plans? And actually, very little thought has been put into what these would actually look like. And I actually think the likes of DFE need to work with government departments like DWP, MOJ to kind of come together to formulate those local skills improvement plans. It's not about just putting the focus on business and having everything employer-led. It's actually reaching out to the people who do this day in, day out, who understand the needs in the local area to then work with businesses and stakeholders. I think in some way we've always gone too far the other way and forgotten about the vital stakeholders that can provide that link. So actually, if it is transportation, that's an issue. Maybe there's a pot of funding somewhere that can provide that split between DFE and DWP, but it's kind of trying to get away from that siloed way of thinking to moving towards, right, how does DWP, DFE and MOJ maybe work together in this area to fill that skills gap? And however that funding is distributed, it can be distributed. But it was one of our frustrations with the white paper that it felt so siloed. But that's just a suggestion that we've taken up with both DWP and DFE, because at the moment you just get stuck somewhere in between.
Indeed. Thank you, Ravina. That's good. And we are working more and more with other government departments. And that's led in part by my colleague Jazz, who's on the call now. We've got an offender employment campaign that organisations can sign up to, that you can sign up to, that's available to organisations, along with the Make UK membership. Stephen, I think it's time that we face the music and ask that poll again and see if we've shifted the thinking.
It's about that time, but I'm not going to lie, we're all a bit nervous. So let's see how it goes. So let's put that up there in 2 seconds. There's a few additional questions on there as well. So it should be on your screens now. For the benefit of the other panelists, this is particularly nerve-wracking because I can see the results coming in live and see how it's going. But good so far.
Stephen, just be kind, whatever comes in.
It's good news so far. So we're on about 60% of people responded. So we'll just give a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Give it another 20 seconds or so. We're up to 70% of people who've responded.
Yeah. Joe, I shouldn't ask you specifically, but I'm sure you won't mind. Your accent is from the Northeast. Were you in a prison up that way?
You must bring back their memories, Lance, yes.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, Durham and Kirk Levington Grange.
Kirk Levington Grange, yeah. So you started at Durham and then you progressed on a D, category D. Did you become a Cat D?
Yeah, straight away, virtually. I was
Yeah.
very, very lucky. So
Good stuff.
very lucky. But
Yeah.
Just quickly, I'm talking to Kirk Levington next week. Is it nice up there?
It's lovely.
Better one side of the fence than the other.
Right.
It's beautiful, Ross.
No, it's because we're looking at setting up as a little hub up there to do some collections.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
I should probably talk to you about it, Lance.
Yeah, well, we've had a brief conversation last year, Ross, but we'll pick it up because of COVID. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, folks. So we've got the results shared then, and I think, well, that is good news. We've got
Indeed
7% of people who say that having a panelist, they would now consider hiring an ex-offender, and only 3% are unsure. So I'd call that a result, guys. I don't know about you.
Brilliant. Thank you, membership.
And some other interesting questions that we asked. So before this event, did you know businesses could provide work opportunities to prisoners and ex-offenders? About 70% of you did, but 30% of you weren't aware of that. So again, hopefully we've changed that perception. Before this event, did you know that the industry level skills are taught in prisons? Most of you did not know about that. So perhaps a bit of messaging there. And before this network, had you heard of the New Futures Network? Again, most of you had not. So again, I think that's probably a messaging piece, and Make UK to be continuing to work with Lance and his team to get that message out there. Finally, is your business looking for new recruits? Just under half of you are, 16% no and 39% unsure. And again, hopefully this event has reassured you that going to Lance and his team is a really good way of filling that need for the 45% who are looking for new recruits. So Lance, before we wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, just to thank the panel first off, and Jazz, who's my colleague there in MOJ Comms, for setting this up with Make UK, and to everybody that's on the call, really appreciate you attending this. We'd hope that it would spark some interest, because what goes on behind prison walls, who knows? But I can assure you there's so much positivity that goes on. And we've heard, I think, from Ross and Henry this morning, the real business benefits of linking with the prison service. And ultimately, these offenders, these prison leavers are coming back into our communities, and we've got to support them. We've got to help them, and we've got to get them back, on the straight and narrow and leading law-abiding lives. So appreciate your time, folks. And hopefully, through Stephen and Make UK and the membership, we can link up soon, and we'll do this event in a prison next time.
Yeah, we're very excited about that. And actually, that was the plan for this originally before COVID happened. So in terms of next steps, what we'll do after this event is share with you all the start of presentations. We'll share with you Lance's contact details as well, because a number of you have messaged me privately in the chat saying, how do we take this forward and how do we find out more? So Lance, prepare to be inundated. I hope you don't mind. And
no, please.
Just echo Lance. thank you for your time today, panelists. Thank you for taking the time to attend today. And yeah, we'll be doing more of this in real life, face to face in a prison. We're allowed to.
See you in prison.
Yeah.
Bye-bye now. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.